Okay, well, the story so far that we've covered in the first two chapters of the book of Exodus. In chapter one, we saw the suffering of the children of Israel. We saw how the population of the Israelites or the Hebrews had grown and posed a threat to Pharaoh, and he became fearful of the growth of the population of the Israelites, and he tried to take measures to prevent the growth of the population. And then in chapter two, we saw God's preparation of a deliverer, of one who would come and set his people free from their oppression. So we saw in chapter two there the birth of Moses, the unusual circumstances of his birth, and his rescue from the river by the daughter of Pharaoh, and his upbringing, first of all, with his own mother, being taken back to his own mother and being brought up by her. And then when he reached a certain age, he was brought up as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. But then we had that incident where Moses killed an Egyptian, and that had been discovered, and that led to Moses fleeing from Egypt and going to the land of Midian, where he came into contact with the priest of Midian, who has 7 daughters. Moses had helped them at the well, and he marries one of the daughters named Zipporah, and they have a son whose name is Gershom. There at the end of chapter 2. And then the final few verses of chapter 2 is a sort of repetition of the account of the sufferings that the people of Israel are going through. That the king who had threatened Moses has now died, but the people of Israel are still under bondage, crying out for help. And God, being aware of this, God heard their groaning, and God remembered the covenant that he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the scene is set for the coming of one who would deliver the Israelites from that condition of slavery there in Egypt. And this is what we come to in chapter 3 this evening. Well, chapters 2 through to chapter 4 is the account of Moses, who is the chosen deliverer. And we see the next part of the story here in chapter 3. So we'll read Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to 6 to begin with here. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and lo, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Then he said, Do not come near. Put off your shoes from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So we come back then to the story of Moses here, and now we find him keeping the flock of his father-in-law. His life has been there in Midian for the past 40 years, but things are soon to change. We notice that here Moses' father-in-law is called Jethro. Back in chapter 2, verse 18, when he was first introduced to us, it was under the name of Reuel, but here he's Jethro. And he is again identified as the priest of Midian. So on this particular occasion, Moses led the flock to the west side of the wilderness, where he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And on the map here, you can see the location. Well, say the location. There's some doubt about whether this is the actual location. This is the traditional identification of Mount Horeb. Horeb is an alternative name for Mount Sinai. Both names are used for this mountain. And the mountain today is called Jebel Musa, and it's 7,600 feet high. So this is the traditional location of this mountain, but again, we can't be 100% certain about this. This Horeb is, as I say, an alternative name for Mount Sinai, and later Moses would lead the Israelites to this point where they would be given the Ten Commandments. So in Exodus chapter 19 and verse 11, the name of the mountain is given as Sinai here. Exodus 19 verse 11. God's instruction to Moses here when they're at the mountain: be ready by the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And then the parallel account of that is in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 10, referring to the same occasion, but the name Horeb is used here. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 10. Moses is recalling here these events that had happened earlier there. He says, how on the day that you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, gather the people to me that I may let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live upon earth, and that they may teach their children so. So the mountain is named Horeb there. So the two names, Sinai and Horeb, are used interchangeably of this mountain. This is a picture of that region and the mountains. You can see how rugged the terrain is there. It's referred to here as the Mountain of God. We don't know whether it was already called the Mountain of God at this time, or whether it was given that name later after the events that took place there. Later on, Elijah, the prophet Elijah, would flee to Horeb when he was threatened with death by Queen Jezebel in 1 Kings chapter 19 and verse 8. Says, and he arose, this is referring to Elijah here, he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. So it's referred to again there as the Mount of God. Sinai was not really given any special significance by the Israelites. It didn't become a place of pilgrimage. They didn't go there to worship at all, and it wasn't regarded as a place where God dwelt in that sense. It was important for the giving of the law and for the events that took place there, but they didn't go there in a sort of regular pilgrimage. We have Elijah fleeing there, and that's really the only example that we do have of that. And the idea that God was not confined to any particular locality. So although it's referred to as the Mountain of God, it's not thought that the Israelites wouldn't think that this is where God lived. But it's at Mount Horeb now that Moses received the call from God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And we're told in verse 2 of Exodus chapter 3 that the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. In Deuteronomy chapter 33 and verse 16, God is described here as the one who dwells in a bush. Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 16, which is poetic section here, where Moses is blessing the children of Israel, and in verse 16, the blessing is upon Joseph, the tribes of Joseph. Let these come upon the head of Joseph, upon the earlier part of the verse, with the best gifts of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of him that dwelt in the bush. So God is described there as him that dwelt in the bush. That's a reference to this event here. So the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses then in this flame of fire out of the bush. And here the angel of the Lord is identified as God himself. When we get down to verse 4, God is the one who is speaking to Moses there. And this is also true of other occasions when the angel of the Lord appears. It's described as the angel of the Lord. An angel is the word that means messenger. But when the angel speaks, it's actually the words of God. So in Judges chapter 2 and verse 1, we read, now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land which I swore to give your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. So it's the angel of the Lord appearing there, but the words spoken are the words of God. And then in Judges chapter 6, verse 12, in the story of Gideon here, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. And Gideon said, pray, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this befallen us? And where are all his wonderful deeds which our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has cast us off and given us into the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? So again, there we see the angel of the Lord appearing, but it's the Lord who speaks to Gideon there in verse 14. And again, another example of that is in Judges chapter 13 with the story of Samson as well. So the appearance of the angel of the Lord is referred to as a theophany. It's a word which means a visible appearance or a manifestation of God. So God is making an appearance that is in the form of this angel of the Lord. Some identify the angel of the Lord as a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, the second member of the Godhead, and some see a connection between Christ, identifying Christ as the angel of the Lord. But here we see that the angel of the Lord then appeared to Moses in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And fire is often used as a symbol of God's presence. God appears in the form of fire. And what caught Moses' attention here was that this bush was burning, but it was not being destroyed by the flame. It wasn't being consumed by the flames. So a burning bush, but nothing is happening to the bush. And various attempts have been made to try to explain this phenomenon. One suggestion is that Moses saw the bush in a vision rather than in reality, and things can happen in visions that don't happen in reality. So that's one explanation. And then other rational explanations have been offered that this bush was of a type which is covered with tiny oil glands, and the oil from these glands could suddenly catch fire. That's another explanation. Or the blossom on a certain type of bush would give the appearance of flames, or the angle of the sunlight on the blossom or the leaves could create the impression that the bush was alight. But none of these explanations are really necessary. The text itself doesn't explain how this could happen. The text simply says that Moses saw a bush. The bush was on fire, and yet it didn't burn up, and that's all that we're told. So this was something out of the ordinary, and this is why it caught Moses' attention. This is different, not seen anything like this before. And so we're told in verse 3 that he turned aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. So it catches his attention. This is something out of the ordinary, so let's go and have a closer look at it. And then when Moses came closer to have a look, it was the Lord who called him out of the bush, calling his name, Moses, Moses. So repeating the name there. And then Moses answered, Here am I. Moses is then commanded not to come any nearer. He's been wanting to go closer to have a look at this. So stop coming nearer. And he's told to remove his shoes from his feet because he is standing on holy ground. There's a similar incident occurs in the book of Joshua, in Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 to 15, involving Joshua here. This is just before the Israelites go and surround the city of Jericho. We have the angel of the Lord appearing again here. Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are you for us or for our adversaries? Whose side are you on? And he said, No, but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, What does my Lord bid his servant? And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, Put off your shoes from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. So again, there we see this the appearance of this character. He's described as the commander of the army of the Lord, and Joshua falls on his face, falls to the ground to worship him, and he's told to take off his shoes because this is holy ground. So it's the presence of that character there, the commander of the Lord's army, that made the ground holy. In the same way here, it's the presence of God in the bush that made that place holy. And this, interesting, is the first time that the word holy is used in the Bible. The voice from the bush now identified himself, saying, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So Moses recognized now that he was in the presence of God, presence of deity, and he hid his face. And we're told here that he hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Again, that's the reaction that people have when they're aware that they've been in the presence of God, that they want to hide. Exodus chapter 33 and verse 20. This is when Moses asked to see God on this occasion, and God says, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. And from Judges again, in the story of Gideon, which we mentioned earlier, Judges chapter 6, verses 22 and 23, after he's had this visit from the angel of the Lord, then Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, and Gideon said, Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, Peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die. So Gideon was afraid that because he'd seen the angel of the Lord face to face, that he would die, but he's reassured that he won't. So those who have had these experiences of being in the presence of God in this way become aware of their own unworthiness, that they have to hide from God, fall down before him and hide from him. Here, the fact that God identifies himself as the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob shows that this is no new or unknown God, but this is the same God who has been worshipped for generations, worshipped by Abraham, going back to the time of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And this God is now about to reveal himself more fully to Moses and the Israelites. Jesus quoted from this verse in Mark chapter 12, verses 26 and 27, when he was in a discussion with the Sadducees. This was over the question of resurrection. The Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. Mark chapter 12, verse 26. Jesus, in answering them, he says, as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, how God said to him, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. So Jesus used that passage there to show that resurrection can happen, and God is the God of the living, not of the dead, that he's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, although all of three were physically dead in the time of Moses when God said that, but they're still alive in another realm, in another sense. So Jesus using that, quoting from that passage there. God now speaks to Moses then, and he tells him that he knows about the affliction and the sufferings of his people. Well, we read here verses 7 to 12. We haven't read this. Verse 7 to 12 continues the story. Then the Lord said, I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. So God here tells Moses that he knows what's going on. He knows about the affliction and the sufferings of his people. I have seen the affliction and have heard their cry. I know their sufferings. So God is sensitive to the needs of his people. He's not indifferent or apathetic. He's a compassionate God. And God does not ignore their condition, but he says, I have come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians. So God is going to take action to bring relief and deliverance from this suffering. He's going to come down to help them. And this shows God's involvement in the events of human history, that he is not above history or detached from these events. We sometimes speak of God as being transcendent, or God as being immanent. When we speak of the transcendence of God, it's the idea that God is above us, God is detached from us. When we speak of the immanence of God, we are speaking of God's presence with us. And God is both of these things. God is above us because he's that much greater from us, he's separate from us, but he is also comes amongst us in order to help us and to show compassion. So these are two aspects of God's being, or God's character, that he is above us, but he is also among us as well. And here God says that he's going to bring the people to another land, which is described as a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And that really describes the goodness of the land that they're to come to. It's a productive land. in comparison to the wilderness where Moses is at that moment. The land that God is going to bring them to, though, is currently occupied by some other people. We have a list of the people who are in that land at that time: the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So the land is inhabited by this mixture of these different ethnic and cultural groups. So it wasn't a unified land at this point. And this was the land that God had promised to give to the descendants of Abraham. Going back to Genesis chapter 15 and verse 17, and God's words to Abraham here, God is reaffirming the covenant here with Abraham, as his name is at this point. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces, the sacrifice that Abraham has offered. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So the promise goes back there to the time of Abraham. And God then it repeats his knowledge in verse 9 of Exodus chapter 3. God repeats his knowledge of the condition of the Israelites. He says, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. So God knows what's going on. He knows what's happening. And God now reveals to Moses what his part will be in this plan of deliverance. God has said, I'm going to come down and I'm going to deliver them, but that will take place. That will happen through Moses. It'd be Moses who will have to carry out God's will in that regard. So this now is Moses' calling, or his commission by God to do this task. God is going to send Moses, he says to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. So this is his mission. So Moses' responsibility will be to appear before Pharaoh to gain the release of the Israelites. So there's no contradiction here between, on the one hand, God saying that he will come down and deliver his people, and asking Moses to do it. So God's normal way of working is through his servants, through those who are willing to serve him. And it will be through Moses that God's will be accomplished. Well, Moses' reaction to this is recorded here in verse 11. He says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I that I should do this? And this is the first in a series of 5 attempts made by Moses to avoid this job that God has called him to do. The next one we'll see comes in verse 13, where he says, if I come to the people of Israel and they ask me, who's the God who sent you, what should I say to them? Then in chapter 4, verse 1, he says, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. They will say, the Lord did not appear to you. Then in chapter 4, verse 10, he says to the Lord, oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either heretofore or since, that thou hast spoken to thy servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue. So I can't speak. I can't speak well. And then in verse 13, he simply says, send someone else. Oh my Lord, send, I pray, some other person. So we get the idea that Moses wasn't that keen on doing this. And so his first question, his first reaction to God here is, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? So he expresses his sense of inadequacy and lack of confidence for this task. Others responded in a similar way when God asked them to do things. Jeremiah is an example of that as well. In Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 to 6. The Lord says to him, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Lord God, behold, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth. So that was Jeremiah's reaction. Gideon had a similar reaction in Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. The Lord turned to him, to Gideon, and said, Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? So there's his commission, what God wants him to do. And he said, Pray, Lord, how can I deliver Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. So we see these similar reactions from Jeremiah and Gideon as Moses had here when God asked him to do this. So there's this feeling of personal inadequacy for the task. A feeling like that should really cause them to rely more upon God, to put their trust in God more. If we do not trust in God, then we're left unable and unwilling to do anything at all, really. So Moses has got himself into this position where he feels that he can't do this, can't do anything for God. And perhaps the experience that he had in Egypt, and he's been away from Egypt for so long, for 40 years, very much isolated there in Midian, and well, you want me to go back there. Well, I haven't been there. I've not lived there for 40 years. So he doesn't really trust in himself to be able to do that. But God answers him here. God gives Moses reassurance of his presence. He says, But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. And similar words of reassurance were given to Gideon as well, as we've seen Judges chapter 6, and also to Jeremiah. As we read those two cases earlier, God responds in the same way. Yeah, you might think you're inadequate, but I will be with you. I will be there to help you. And Moses' calling by God will be confirmed by a sign. He said, when you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. So they will come back to Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai, when they've been released from Egypt. And so the success of Moses' mission will show that God has been with him all along. Well, we'll read verses 13 to 22, the final part of the chapter. Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will hearken to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now we pray you, let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all the wonders which I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor and of her who sojourns in her house jewelry of silver and of gold and clothing, and you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. Thus you shall despoil the Egyptians. So the assurance that God had given to Moses that he would be with him was not sufficient for Moses to willingly take on the task to which he has been called. And so he raises another problem now. If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? It's not that Moses was unfamiliar with the names of God, nor that the people would be trying to test his knowledge. What Moses is wanting to know is how he will be able to validate his call before the people of Israel. How will he be able to convince them that he has the authority to act in this way? And the question that Moses anticipates the people asking may show that they might be expecting a new name or a new title for God. If Moses has received this new revelation from God, then a new title or a new name that would reflect some other aspect of the characteristic of God. God answers Moses here by telling him to say to the people, I am has sent me to you. And God describes himself as I am who I am. This is an interesting phrase, and one possible translation of this is I will be what I will be. And it's a sort of reference in there to what we'll see later as the name Yahweh. And there's been a lot of discussion over the meaning of this phrase, I am who I am. Some see it as a reference to the self-existent being of God, that God exists, as opposed to idols who have no existence, no being. I am he who is one possible way of translating the phrase. And Moses is told to use this name, I am, or I will be, when telling the Israelites who it is who has sent him. So God will make himself known as the one who exists through his actions and by his words. God is known as the one who brought Israel out of Egypt, that he is the one who exists, the one who has done that. And God instructs Moses further in what he is to say to the people, that he's told to tell them that the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. Here, in your version, you'll probably find that Lord is spelt all in capital letters, uppercase letters. And when you see that, you know that it's the translation of the divine name, or the letters YHWH, which is sometimes pronounced as Yahweh, or Jehovah is derived from that as well. Yahweh may be regarded as the personal name of God. And in later years, the Jews regarded the name as so sacred and holy that they would not pronounce it. And they would substitute the name Lord, the Hebrew name Adonai, and they would read that instead. And so over time, the correct pronunciation of the name Yahweh has been lost. So nobody really knows exactly how it is spelt, or how it should be pronounced. But God tells Moses here that he is to use this name, Yahweh, when he's speaking to the Israelites and identifying himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this name, by this name, he is identifying himself as that same God. So Moses is not introducing a new God to them, but he's introducing a new name for the same God who's been worshipped for generations. And of this name, Yahweh, God says, "This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations." That's the name that would be regarded as the personal name of God, or the covenant name that God used. God then continues by giving Moses some practical instructions on what he is to do. When he gets back to Egypt, he is to gather together the elders of Israel, so the community leaders. He's to tell them that God has appeared to him and has spoken to him. And Moses is to convey to the Israelites that God knows what they've been through. He's observed their conditions, and he has promised to bring them out of their affliction and to take them to a land of their own. So God is going to act to deliver them. And God tells Moses that the Israelites will listen to him. And then he is to go with the elders to Pharaoh, and he's to tell Pharaoh that the Lord, again, there's the name Yahweh, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And they are to ask permission to go on a 3-day journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord. Now, although Moses is to go and ask permission to go on this 3-day journey, there's never any intention of going back to Egypt. And Pharaoh would have no doubt understood that. And all this is part of what will be a bargaining process between Pharaoh and Moses, trying to get permission for the people to leave. And we'll see the progression of that as we go through the story. God tells Moses that he knows that Pharaoh will not let them go. You can go and ask him, but I know he won't let you go. He says, unless compelled by a mighty hand. So God will then stretch out his hand and smite Egypt, he says, with all the wonders which I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. So God is warning Moses here of what's going to happen. That these wonders that he refers to here would be the plagues that would come upon Egypt. And they will have to go through all of those before Pharaoh will finally agree to let them leave. And God makes the promise there that the Israelites will be treated favorably by the Egyptians. That when the time comes for them to leave, they will ask their neighbors for jewelry and silver and gold and clothing, and they would give them to them. And so in this way, when they leave, they will despoil the Egyptians, is the way that it's put there at the end, which would be a sort of form of compensation for all of their years of slavery that they had suffered there. And so this is the part of the story that we'll finish at this evening. There's still more to come on this meeting between God and Moses still has some further reasons why he thinks he shouldn't be doing this. But we see God's preparation for Moses here in these words and in this meeting at the bush. In Acts chapter 7, verses 30 to 35, Stephen, in his speech there, summarizes this period here. He says, now when 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in a flame of fire in a bush. When Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight, and as he drew near to look, there came the voice of the Lord. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. And Moses trembled and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their groaning, and I have come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send you to Egypt. This Moses whom they rejected, saying, who made you a ruler and judge? This man God sent as both ruler and redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. That's Stephen's summary there of these events. A couple of questions that we might want to think about from this. What does Moses' experience at the burning bush teach us about the character of God? What do we learn about God from this? And how does God's answer to Moses' question, who am I, help us when we have doubts about ourselves? So we'll stop here and we'll continue with the story in chapter 4 next Wednesday evening. And if anyone has any thoughts or comments, and